kind of a beneficial, a theme of benefit throughout the entire program, because I'm super a big proponent of this program. I've seen quite a few successes. I've seen growth. I've seen mergers and acquisitions, and I've seen really, really cool technology come out of this. So the theme is really about the benefits of this program. I'm going to be speaking, though, kind of about the nuts and bolts of the program, things to consider, the phases, and some statistics. The statistics will hopefully give you an idea on the breadth and some of the challenges, too, that come along with this program. But we'll get into it here. First, we'll talk about the program overview, kind of what it is. If you've never heard of it before, what does even SBIR stand for? The structure of the program, some considerations to have when thinking about, this is kind of like the challenge piece, the considerations. And the benefits, of course, are something I'll focus on, but it's going to be a theme, like I said, throughout. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process as well. Let's start with what the program is. So SBIR stands for the Small Business Innovative Research Program. And it's combined with, I don't know if you saw on the first slide, it's called the SBIR STTR program. Technically, STTR stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. And they are one and the same, and we'll talk about the differences here shortly. But in general, throughout the program, if I'm saying SBIR program, I'm kind of meaning the whole umbrella. It does fund early stage R&D, and I have tech in for quotes just because tech can be high tech or it can be low tech. I mean, we could be talking about AI that's going to be teaching, Martian astronauts, or we can talk about a client of mine is working on, and this is public knowledge, and we'll talk about what of your technology gets to be public knowledge, but a client of mine is working on a shipping container with solar panels that's a mobile off-grid refrigerated unit. So, that's not necessarily, it's technology, but, it's not AI for Mars. So the tech can be broad. And we'll talk about the agencies and some of their interests here later. This program is the largest source of early stage financing for small businesses in the United States. So that's why it's called America's Seed Fund. It's very important to the participating agencies to bolster the economy and get some cool stuff out of it from the small businesses. It's a 3-phase program. We'll talk about what those are later. And the SBA serves as the coordinating agency. So they're sort of the managing agency. They're the ones who write the policy. They're the ones who have to report to Congress on the success or the statistics of it. There's implementation rules that they have to follow. So when you go to SBIR.gov, SBA is running that. So they're the kind of the main information link. And then each of the agencies have kind of their own funnels and websites and rules and all that kind of thing too. As I mentioned, the goals are to stimulate technological innovation. Again, technology could be high or low. However, it needs to be innovative. That's the key. That's the I in SBIR. And so throughout this presentation, I'm going to keep coming back to what is innovation. And innovation is, at its core, moving the needle on the state of the art, the current state of the art. The other goal of the program is to meet the federal government's R&D needs. So a lot of agencies have a lot of things and missions that they want to accomplish. And they know that that's not necessarily going to come from, and I'll just use an example, everybody knows, like Lockheed Martin is not, they have skunk works and they have other things, inside of them, but honestly, a lot of the greatest innovations are coming from small businesses, or small businesses that might be partnered with research institutions. And so the government is looking to that sector to meet their needs. It's also meant to encourage participation and entrepreneurship in the sense of innovation by socially and economically disadvantaged persons and disadvantaged companies. So it's an element that's not necessarily scored. There's not set-asides, but there are questions in the applications to identify the company ownership and the principal investigators. And that data is reported to Congress to see how well the program is reaching folks in the socially and economically disadvantaged group. It's also meant to increase, and this is kind of actually the major goal if we were to kind of rank these, but private sector commercialization in general of the innovations that started off in these programs is the ultimate goal of the program. So moving something from an idea, from something with a low technology readiness level, if you're familiar with that term, all the way up to on the shelf, essentially, or selling it or modifying a basic model, or providing a service to the outside world. And that's the ultimate goal of funding through the program. From the SBA, this is the overall mission: supporting scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of federal research funds in critical American priorities to build a strong national economy. And that's done one small business at a time. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, to be honest, this sounds like a pretty lofty, slick, put it on the website mission. But honestly, this actually happens in this program. And that's why I really, really like it. I have seen businesses built from 1 to 2 people, and a year or two later, they're at 50. It's just amazing how with the right path and sometimes a little bit of luck, you could definitely grow some amazing companies with this program. So as I promised, the STTR is slightly different. So it's not a separate program. They're all underneath the same umbrella. There are what we'll call topics, and we'll kind of get into that, is that the agency says, I've got these needs, and here's some things I want done. And those are called topics. And they have SBIR topics, which are small business led and can be entirely small business led. And then they have STTR topics. So R&D needs that they want you to partner with a research institution. So university, FFRDC, nonprofit institute. So you have to have this institutional partner to respond as an STTR proposal. And that's the main difference, really. It's a vehicle in the sense that they being the agencies, they believe that whatever they want is a really good fit for pulling innovation out of these research institutions via a small business prime contractor to bring that benefit into commercialization. So, I don't know if they feel that they know that there's something out there and that only the research institutions have the ability. Perhaps it's a topic or a need that requires particular laboratory, that you would not have as a small business. That's honestly what I see most often. Topics that require human research, perhaps that a university can help you with an IRB. That's another reason, but we'll kind of talk about how many topics we see in SBIR and how few topics are in STTR. There are fewer participating agencies. There's only 5, as you see here, that do STTRs. And so they're the ones that decide how much of how many topics go out or whether or not a particular topic can be an STTR or not. Now, this does not preclude you from partnering with a research institution on an SBIR. You can definitely do that. It's just that on an STTR topic, you have to have one with you. These are the agencies of the federal government that participate in the program, and they essentially qualify for the program because they have R&D budgets that exceed $100 million. And when that happens, per the law that allows SBIR to live, they have to allocate 3.2% of their budget, of that R&D budget, to SBIR topics and 0.45% to STTR. So you can see there's quite a bit more money that's going into SBIR. So there's quite a few more awards that go into SBIR versus STTR. That's the overview of just kind of the program in general and what it is, and hopefully gives you an idea of where we're starting here. As I mentioned, it is a 3-phased program. It's meant to move technology from early stage idea through commercialization. And it does that with first starting at a phase 1. So the purpose is to test the scientific and technical merit, commercial merit of the feasibility of a concept. So it needs to have some legs, though. I mean, I couldn't wake up one morning and have an idea for something and go get an SBIR the next day. I need to have a little bit of skin in the game already. And again, going back to that technology readiness level, if you've never heard of it, I'd suggest Googling it and finding the list. NASA has a little bit different definitions than maybe the other agencies, but they're pretty much all the same, where typically we're looking at about a TRL level 2 on average to start on a scale of 1 to 10, I think, or 1 to 9. So NASA, for example, will give the TRL level they expect you to start at and where they expect you to end if you went through all the 2 phases before commercialization. And so that gives you kind of a clue of where you need to be. So if you do just have a very basic idea on paper right now, take a look at the TRL levels, see what you might need to do or invest in before you get into the program to get it to the right spot to start this. But these are typically 6 to 12 months long. It depends on the agency. Some allow option periods. So the Navy is one of those where you'll propose certain tasks and things you want to get done in the base period, and then they'll award an option, which serves as a bridge sort of between your phase 1 and phase 2. Not all of them do that. Some of them say you only have 6 months. Some of them ask you to tell them how many months you need within a range. And the values range quite a bit too. Typically, they're about 100,000 to 275. And so that is getting you in the door. You say you're at a TRL level 2, you might move the needle to a 3 or a 4 with this money and with the time that you have. Again, you're just testing feasibility, really, of a concept. If you've done that well and the government agrees, you do have to write a proposal for phase 2. So it's still competitive. It's almost like a down select, where typically they'll award a few phase 1s, and then those phase 1s will compete for a phase 2. So your competition is definitely a lot smaller because you're only competing against phase 1 winners typically. But the whole concept here is to move where you finished phase 1, kind of that yes, this is feasible. It has legs. We're going to, this is going somewhere. And moving that into a prototype / demonstration stage. Now, some topics, depending on the agency, might expect some sort of very rudimentary prototype or demo at the end of phase 1. So, I'm just kind of generalizing here. Every agency and every topic that they're asking for will be a little bit more specific on the objectives that they have. But again, in general, we're kind of moving to prototype. So at the end of phase 2, you should have something that has proven its worth, and that you might just need a little bit more investment or a little bit more funding to turn it into commercialization. Like, you can manufacture it, you can sell it to the masses. These phase 2s are typically 24 months long, and they range hugely between 600 and over $1 million, depending on the agency. Even within the agency, certain topics might be worth a lot more money for phase 2 because the government recognizes it's just a very expensive thing to do. So your goal is obviously to move from phase 1 to phase 2, but the ultimate goal is to hit what this, like, we call it like a mythical phase 3. Phase 3 is not a competitive situation where you're going to go get a phase 3 contract. Now, I know certain agencies will label a contract a phase 3. All that really means is that you are getting non-SBIR STTR funds on a contract for the purpose of moving that phase 2 innovation into the commercial marketplace. So these can be sole sourced. So these do not have to be competed. There is, I will say there's effort that happens here that, you really have to kind of impress a customer. You have to knock on some doors. You have to kind of hit the streets to ensure that if you want this extra money to continue to move this through towards commercialization, it's not going to come from a competitive solicitation within the SBIR program, which is what you had been doing. It's going to come from a customer, whether it's the same customer potentially that you were supporting and they just have a different color of money, for example, it's non-SBIR money to throw at you, or it could be a private company and you're just counting that work as phase 3. You have to report all of this stuff. And so phase 3 is kind of a mixed bag of just commercialization dollars, but your ultimate goal is to get to phase 3. That's the whole purpose of the program, to bring ideas to the commercial market, to support the government industry, to support the private industry, and the government, if they're really excited about you and they really want something to go and say into a larger mission or a larger program, they will provide money. It's just going to come from that program or that mission instead of SBIR bucket for R&D. And so this is really great. There are opportunities, particularly with the Air Force, that will allow you to jump from phase 1 to phase 3. Various agencies allow you to come in directly at phase 2 if your TRL level is high enough, and you already have kind of self-funded commercialization. Self-funded phase 1, and you have to explain exactly kind of like you did your own phase 1 on your own dime. So there are opportunities to jump around or insert yourself in the middle, but the majority of the time you're coming in at a phase 1. And that can be really tricky because some people may not yet qualify for a directive phase 2, or the agency that they're working with doesn't use a directive phase 2. And they've already self-funded their phase 1. And so there are people we work with that kind of are in this purgatory of no man's land where they don't really fit into a phase. And there is some strategy to align yourself with a particular phase or a particular topic, if that aligns with your business plan. So there's some things to think about in an overall strategy sense if you're not exactly fitting into one of these phases. There is such thing as what we call phase 0, but it's just a couple of agencies, and really I've only seen it work in NSF. But it's a company's opportunity to pitch what they want to do before they're invited to phase 1. And this is really nice in a way because you're not spinning your wheels on something and then sending in this proposal that took you a lot of time and money to create. And then the government's like, what are you doing? This doesn't even fit. We don't want this. So it's just it's supposed to accelerate things. I don't know if that really accelerates things in time. I haven't necessarily seen it go faster. But NSF and NIH are the ones who kind of use this pitch element. And this is the link for the NSF version. You have to do this phase 0 or project pitch, as they call it, for NSF. You go online, write up about a 1,500 word online application talking about what you want to do, who you are, what your company is, what the benefits are. And in 3 to 5 weeks, approximately, NSF will get back to you and say, yeah, this is good. We want you to propose a phase 1. Or they'll say, no, thank you. And they'll usually give you some sort of reason for the no, thank you, which is nice, but you can try again. So this is a nice little addition that NSF does so that you're not necessarily wasting time. Okay, so it's a great program. Lots of cool things, can give you some money, move you towards commercialization. So as you saw, I mean, over $1 million in the end over the course of 2.5 years, 3 years. But how many people actually win? People always ask me, what's the win rate? I'll explain this so you don't have to stare too much. So the top line, the top orange line with the diamonds are the selection rates for phase 2s. So as you can see, the success rate as of 2019 was about 60%. And that's really attributable to the fact that you're only competing against typically phase 1 winners, or you're coming in as a direct to phase 2 winner. The selection rate for phase 1 is that lower line with the circle or with the dots around the 20% mark. And that is generally what the win rate is. You can imagine it's a pretty popular program. There are thousands of applications that go in, and your job is to stand out from the crowd. And the way that you do that is you, follow the instructions, pay very particular attention to compliance with your proposal. You don't want to getting kicked out because you missed some small thing, like one page, an important page is missing or it's too long, margins are too wide. But the biggest other two things are about innovation, being very clear that you are innovative, and being very clear that you have a path to commercialization. And those are very difficult to achieve. So that's why not only we have a lot of people competing, but to hit that trifecta of the perfect proposal can be very challenging, especially if you haven't written thousands of proposals before. So again, there's companies out there that have done quite a few of these, and they've been doing them for decades. They're very good at writing these. They can pump them out. But if you're new to the program, this can be a pretty challenging, time-consuming process, and you may not win the first time, or if you put in a couple proposals the first couple times. But you can propose to multiple agencies, and you can propose the same idea to multiple agencies. You just have to let them know that you're doing that, and you can only work on one if you're awarded both, for example. So there are opportunities to get this number higher. So don't be discouraged. It kind of can look discouraging to get into the program, but if you do things right, your win rate could be higher than 20%. As you can imagine, this is the award summary by agency. As you can imagine, the award count, which is the orange line with the circles on it, is highest for DoD. So they issue the most awards. They send out the most money. Health and Human Services is second in that, and then DOE is third. DOE is maybe fourth, actually. Now that I'm staring at it, NASA's third, which makes sense. So these are the agencies that I think we all kind of logically know have big budgets and therefore have big R&D budgets and therefore have big SBIR budgets. So they'll have the most topics, they'll have the most opportunity to respond to them, and therefore the higher likelihood of a win potentially, because there's just a lot bigger pie. Then it kind of goes down from there. DoD issues their solicitations 3 times a year. I believe the next one is going to be released in early May. NASA does theirs 1 time a year. That closed a couple of weeks ago. So if you're wanting to work with NASA, unfortunately, you'll have to wait till next January. DOE is 2 times a year. So I'm just giving these examples so that you know that the opportunities to grab these awards come on a schedule, and we'll talk about that in a second. So that's another reason why there's more awards for certain agencies than others. To break it down by selection rate, these are the civilian agency selection rates. Oh, excuse me, DoD isn't here. I apologize. This is EPA is super high, and I'm not exactly sure why for phase 1. That's kind of an outlier, but you can see the rest of them are in the generally around the 20% mark as average. So that kind of matches the previous screen. And then phase 2 selection rates generally hover around the 50%. This comes from the 2019 report. I apologize, I didn't update the reference. I know it's 2023, but I was happy yesterday to see that they had updated to 2029 or to 2019, because last year and 2021 they had not yet updated. So this is the most recent information on what we have as it's been reported. The STTR selection rates generally are about the same for the phase 1s for the agencies that participate. So there's not much difference there. The phase 2 selection rates are super high for DoD and NASA, but then jump into the 50 percentile. And I haven't really sat and contemplated the 98, 92% and why that would be for those 2 agencies. But in general, we're kind of following the same trends. Okay, some considerations. I've already brought up one big consideration is that what we call the P-win, the probability of a win for phase 1, as reported, is not super exciting. That is a consideration to take into account. But at the most basic level, and these are just these comments come from people when they call and ask us to help them with a proposal, is really bigger to think about first before you start thinking about your probability of win. So it's not a place to sell your invention to the government. Again, this is a 3-phase program to bring stuff to the commercial market. Now, you can have a patent, you can have something you've invented, but you need to propose what you're going to do with that. What is the need you're meeting with the government? What further R&D needs to be done? What is it going to be incorporated into? So it's not a place to say, hey, I patented this and I've built it and I'm ready to just sell it to you off the shelf. That's not what the program is. It's not guaranteed. And as we already talked about, it's still competitive unless you're hitting towards a phase 3. It can't be a continuous R&D track. Some people use the term as an SBIR shop. Those are companies that have a tendency to just do phase 1s and 2s and 1s and 2s and just live there. The SBA has put benchmarks into place and commercialization goals and gives you commercialization scores to ensure that you're going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, and that you're getting outside investment, you're getting sales, you're actually commercializing, you're getting real phase 3 contracts. You can't sit in the 1 and 2 forever. You have to actually do something with the R&D that you've built. Even though it's for small businesses, even though you might be a 2-person company who won a contract, it still has federal reporting requirements, audits, all the other government regulations. Unfortunately, I wish that there was some reprieve from a lot of this stuff for the tiny companies. But unfortunately, you're still having to deal with some of that red tape. It still is taxpayer dollars. And so therefore, there's still things you have to be doing. It's also not a value engineering program in general. So we're looking for innovation. So we're not looking for tiny incremental, give me $100,000 so I can add a switch to this thing that I've already been doing. That switch doesn't really cause the state of the art to change. So there are particular agencies that will harp on this more than others. But again, what I'm really trying to say is that you need to have innovation. What it is to have your R&D as a company. You have R&D needs. If you're looking at the SBIR program, you would have R&D needs, and you need those funded. And this is non-dilutive funding. So you're not going to an angel, you're not going to a VC, you're not going to friends and family when, maybe your friends and family don't ask for ownership, which is nice, which could be non-dilutive as well. But next to friends and family, I think having SBIR non-dilutive funding is pretty nice to move R&D that you already need to have accomplished and you're already needing to do in order to make your company successful. It's nice to have that given to you by the government. It's an opportunity to investigate commercialization. So you may not have like the perfect commercialization plan or approach in phase 1. You might not yet know exactly what the best market is or the market fit or the market size. And this is your opportunity to obtain government funding to help you identify how to bring something to market and exactly what the market is, and maybe exactly what the thing is. Stuff does change, especially after phase 1, and you might start seeing that your original feasible idea is not really feasible. So there's some interesting things to think about there. It is a way to diversify revenue. We have clients that have government contracts outside the SBIR program, or they're subcontractors to other people, and then they have their little SBIR portfolio. So it's a good way to diversify your revenue. It is a really cool program, from the outside of someone I don't own an SBIR company, but I have helped so many for almost 20 years now. The really cool things that people have been able to do and really benefiting society and the economy, of course, their own businesses. It's just super cool to see some of the stuff that has come out. You're also supporting civilian and military needs, stuff that our federal government needs to, in turn, support us. So that's a really cool benefit of it too. Again, you have to further the state of the art. That is key. That is what the program is all about. And also, I've seen this happen time and again, is that there are companies who believe that their ultimate customer might be the federal government. Perhaps it's the DoD and the military, and this is their way to kind of break in. You can come in off the street and not know a single soul at the DoD and get your first SBIR, and then you start knowing people, and then you can start, maybe you get another one from a different agency or another one from the same agency, and you go into phase 2 or you go direct to phase 3 through the programs that allow that to happen. And it allows you to start getting connections and contracts outside of the program. So it's a pretty good way to break in. And obviously to grow a company, as I mentioned in the beginning, I've been through more than a few acquisitions of my SBIR companies. And the thing that made them valuable to the larger businesses that acquired them was the intellectual property that they developed during this program. And that's what made them attractive and made them some good money. So, and then some of my clients have not been acquired, have chosen not to sell, and just have grown to be significant companies that have gone on to raise series funding and, obtain outside investors. They're too big for the SBIR program now, and they don't need it. And they have just full commercial contracts, and they don't even do government work at all anymore. And so that's a really cool way to grow your company too. As I mentioned too, it's also a path to the sole source, the coveted sole source contract, where you don't have to compete at phase 3. Now, not every small business in the United States is eligible, and small is a subjective word, small business. The SBA puts the small business size for this program not on like revenue, but on the number of employees, and it's 500 or fewer, including your affiliates. So if you have a parent company or sister companies or subsidiaries, those all count towards that number. But I have to say that it's 500 doesn't seem small to me. I've been working in the small business community for so long that 500 seems like a very large business. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But you are competing against those sized companies for this money, and so it kind of makes your challenge a little bit greater, because you don't necessarily have the resource of a 499 person company. But that does not mean you cannot beat them or win. But you just have to be smaller than this. You have to be independently owned and operated and be a for-profit and have your principal place of business in the United States. And the ownership structure has to be 50% owned by US citizens or permanent resident aliens, or other small concerns that are considered small businesses and owned by US citizens. So the eligibility rule, if you have an interesting ownership structure, I would definitely reach out to an expert, either at the Apex Accelerator or someone who's familiar with the SBIR program, to talk about whether or not you're eligible if you've got a kind of a funny situation. When you actually win, the work must be performed in the United States. So this means that you cannot have a consultant or a subcontractor sitting in another country doing the work for you. It actually has to be performed on US soil. So for the most part as well, too, most of the requirements from the agencies say anything that you purchase must be American made to the best of your ability. And particularly NASA doesn't want to see anything purchased with their money that's not US made. So there's a very strong focus, obviously, on keeping all of the dollars in the United States. We have to self-perform 2/3 of the work for phase 1 and 50% of the work for phase 2. So this means that you have to essentially do 2/3 of the work yourself. So if you're, a sole proprietor and you have an idea and you need to hire 1099s to do most of the work that you're wanting to do, that can't happen. You actually need to incur the costs under your own company, for labor. And each agency is different on how they calculate that. But it's something to keep in mind, because we've often run into people who can't meet this threshold. And so again, this is a consideration for whether or not you're ready for the program, if you have the resources to self-perform the scope of work that you're offering, and essentially retain the majority of the money yourself. The principal investigator who's essentially the liaison, the lead, the expert, for your company who's going to be leading the research and development. They have to be employed at your business for the majority of their time. So that pretty much means they can't work anywhere else for more than like 20 hours a week. That's agency dependent on how you explain or prove that. And that's kind of what I was just saying. The calculation of full-time or majority time is called out in the solicitation. The consideration for commercialization really is, where does this technology end up? When you're sitting down to think about your phase one and whether or not you're going to go after it, you have to think towards the end. Where do you want this thing to be in 2.5 to 5 years? What is this thing? What are you doing? How are you selling it? What's the market? How big is it? Do you have government customers who will buy it? And then I'm not just saying tangible things. There could be services or, things that are intangible, like software. Who are the commercial customers that you could sell these to? Can you go to both? Or are they what we call dual use? And I think I mentioned this. What is the market size? And ultimately, what will this do for your company? You could totally get R&D money. You could do stuff. You could do stuff for the government, but is that in alignment with your business plan and where you want your company to go? Does it kind of mess things up a little bit? It's all things you need to consider. The agency applicability, too, is something to consider, is that when you're looking at these different agencies who participate, which agency has the most applicability to what you're doing? There's a lot of cross-pollination between agency interests and the things that you can imagine, like artificial intelligence. A lot of agencies are eager to do different things with that. So it kind of takes a little bit of digging to figure out where you might be. And then again, where does the alignment happen with your company's goals? Is it specific, or is your technology sort of malleable to the agency's need? Is it high risk, high reward? This is super important for NSF. They want to see high risk, high reward sort of stuff. So if you're in that bucket, NSF would probably be a good place for you. Is it something that's solely military and you really have to figure out how to, break into a particular component of the military and really hone your technology for their needs? And then understanding what the agency understands to be state of the art. What are they doing in relation to your technology? That's a key component to understanding where you might fit. As I mentioned, the solicitation schedule is different for each agency. This is off of the SBIR.gov site. So if you want to study it a little bit and kind of get your bearings, go ahead and go over there. Right now, we're looking at DOD, EPA is coming up, HHS is always open, and NSF is essentially always open. So that's kind of your options right now. And then the summertime and into the fall, it gets really a little bit busier, but the beginning of the year is usually the most busy in terms of the opportunities out there. So what are the specific benefits of the program? What do winning companies look like? How does this program help them? That's probably the best way to kind of understand, like, if this is worth it all to jump into this program. And the SBIR.gov website has a bunch of success stories that you can look at. And I just provided a few here about some interesting projects that had been worked on. And you can see they're very, very broad. Translation technologies, prosthetics, decontamination facilities, traumatic brain injuries. So there's a lot of really cool stuff, and you can see what these companies have been doing, not only on SBIR.gov, but usually they have success stories on the websites themselves. NSF specifically has some really good success stories that you can read. And another huge benefit, as I mentioned, in the value that comes from my clients that have been acquired has been in the IP that they've developed in the program. And I can do like a whole hour on this, but I just wanted to, get your mind working that, if you're doing R&D and you're moving the needle and state of the art, obviously you're generating IP And for the government, that's technical data, computer software documentation, and patents, and computer software. And so what's happening is that you're developing these things, you get to own and keep them, and you're kind of giving them a license to that stuff, but that license is protected for 20 years, and they have a very limited, they never do anything with license. So something to think about. And so we call that SBIR data rights is essentially what that license is. So when people say, hey, there's got to be a catch to this free money, the catch is this like very, very, very limited license that the government gets for 20 years to the intellectual property. The title to any patentable inventions remain with your inventor. So again, you get to keep any patentable inventions. You just have to follow regulations. So that's sort of the catch, but I still think overall it's a very, very good deal. You could have pre-existing IP, just know that everything is protected. You have these certain category of rights that you get to retain. And then I'm just going to kind of flip through these so that you know that there's a whole IP thing that happens here. But you get to protect prior rights is really the issue, and patents are respected by the government too, just like any other commercial customer. And then if you have commercial rights, like say you have a software that might be delivered in some respect and you have an end user license agreement, the government has to respect those as well. The program has technical and business assistance that they offer, which is really, really great. So the SBA has said, yes, we're making you commercialize, and that's the goal, but we understand you're a small business and you may not have the resources to commercialize. And so they're offering this extra funding, and this, depending on the agency, can be included in your overall budget or it's an add-on. But it can do all of these things: product sales, protection, market research, commercialization report, regulatory stuff. It's really broad and it's super flexible, and it's really great to have. So you can see these are the agency's amounts that they allow. So certain agencies give you $50,000 in phase 2 to commercialize. And particularly if you've ever paid for IP attorneys, you know, this is a great little windfall to help you patent something, or, you know, to pay for like a business development consultant or an accounting consultant, you know, to help get your accounting system in order. It's a lot of really good stuff. So this is fairly new in terms of the life of the SBIR program. Super, super helpful. And it's paid for by the agency. Your TABA provider can be is kind of like a subcontractor. The agency pays you, you pay them with the money. And you have to identify at the time of your proposal who you're going to use. There's not like a TABA directory. Some agencies have TABA providers that you can tap into and you don't go out and get your own. So this is something you just have to consider if you don't want to use their TABA provider and you've got somebody else. So just read the solicitation carefully on how to ask for this extra money, but definitely ask for this extra money if it's available to you. It's just super important to get that free stuff. So the process, and I'm just going to kind of go through this a little quickly, just so that we have time for questions. But, you know, where do you start, right? So I keep talking about these topics. So first, are you a best fit? Are you working on a technology? Do you have a specific idea and you're looking for funding? Is your company eligible? And then you say yes, yes, yes. Then you have to go register to do business with the government, which the Apex Accelerator can definitely help you with. You can identify agencies, as we just talked about how to do that. And then you apply to the specific solicitation. So, I mean, it seems really simple, but this does take time. So this, if you are thinking, oh, well, maybe DOD here in the next little month, you should probably start today. The education piece is great on the SBIR.gov site. Their resources tab has a lot of information. I definitely recommend going out there if you haven't been there yet. You should also look at prior awards to help you identify kind of where you fall. The SBIR.gov search function will help you find. So I was saying, hey, this information's public. You have an abstract sort of summary thing in every agency's proposal, and that will become public. And that's what you can see online from perhaps your competitors. These are all the registrations that you'll have to complete. They can take time, particularly SAM.gov, that second one. So get on it soon. And note that, some agencies have these interesting things. Like I mentioned, NSF has a project pitch, but DOE also has a letter of intent that they require. So just really pay attention to the process. And then some need to knows, just kind of a summary here as we close that, that you have agency regulations. Those will change depending on the agency and the type. You do need to ensure that you're meeting your topic objectives and that you have a plan to move through your phases before you start writing. Those are the best proposals. If you do have relationships with anybody in the government, technical point of contacts, program managers, those are typically more successful. So if you do have those connections, definitely capitalize on those. And you will have to watch out for export control, which is ITAR, and data rights issues, and do as best as you can to ask a lot of questions. That's really helpful to kind of break into that phase one. And just knowing what's ahead of you in phase two, you're going to have to be pretty particular on how you build up your pricing. They want to see where the money is going. So you could have some audits. Each agency is a little bit different. You do have to have some quantifiable commercialization ideas. And if the agency allows it, letters of support definitely help that commercialization pitch. And anything that you purchase might be treated differently depending on the agency and whether or not you can keep it. So there's so much to consider once you actually begin writing. But most of these government regulatory considerations really come into play once you start in phase two. These are the useful websites I just recommend going out. But like I said, every single agency has their own website for the SBIR. So if you're interested, go directly to that website. That's great. Okay, that is the end of my presentation. So I am open for questions. I have seen some stuff come in the chat, but I have not been monitoring. So feel free to throw stuff at me.
Thanks, Stephanie. That was great. And yes, this is your opportunity. We've got 5 minutes left. If you have any questions for Stephanie, to type them out in the chat box, or if you'd like her to, go over anything you may have missed earlier in the presentation. Somebody's asking, how can they contact you? Is your contact information on the slides at the end there, Stephanie?
Yes, that is my contact information.
Okay, great. I'll be sending the slides out shortly. And also this has been recorded, so that'll be available later today. So you can watch again or share with your team members if you wish. Let me see. So I don't see, somebody's asking if the Maryland Apex Accelerator offers advice on SBIR and STTR. Yes, we do. Just specify that when you complete our application form, that's what you're looking for help with. Okay, this question's come in. How do you inform other agencies that you are applying to multiple agencies?
That's a great question. So typically there is a checkbox on a form, and the technical volume instructions will direct you to report any what they typically call similar or relevant proposals or awards that you've received. So you just kind of write up a little paragraph.
Okay, thanks. Next question is for me. Where can I find a counselor specializing in SBIR, STTR? Just complete our application form on our website to become a client of ours. And in the application, it will ask you what specific type of help you're looking for. If you put SBIR or STTR, we will make sure that is a counselor you're assigned to. Right now, it's taking about 30 business days to get a counselor because we are absolutely inundated with requests and we only have a handful of counselors, unfortunately. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any other questions. So I think we can wrap this up, Stephanie.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate everyone spending their time with me and drinking from this fire hose for an hour. And if you do have questions, feel free to email me and I'd be happy to get back to you on anything you need. And thank you again, Yasmin and your team there in Maryland. And I hope you all have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. And thanks everybody for participating. Bye-bye.